let's go ahead and just click this off. So we created a characteristic. That's cool. We defined the characteristic UUID. We created a characteristic. We added the characteristic to the service. We created a characteristic callback. We did the whole subclassing thing, and we're sending the millis. Okay, wow, whew, that's a lot. All right, let me just do a quick recap of where we're at, because we've just been going over a lot of stuff, right? So we've got our BLE device include. We've got some defines at the top, our UUIDs that we've pulled in, and our device name. We've got our callback section where we've got our server callbacks for on connect and on disconnect. We've got our my characteristic callbacks that we just talked about, and we're overriding that on read function. And then in the setup, we've got our serial communication going on. We set our pin mode for that LED that turns on and off for our server callbacks. We initialize our device. We create a server. We add server callbacks to our server. Then we add a service to our server. Then we add a characteristic to our service. Then we add callbacks to our characteristic. We start the service, and then we start our advertising. Whew, that's a lot. Well, hey, let's check the phone app and see if this is actually working. Hopefully I'm not getting ahead of myself here. All right, here we are in the light blue app, and we can see our CIA monitoring devices up here. Click on this. All right, nothing's changed there. I'm going to go ahead and click connect. Okay, cool. My LED comes on, and we can see here, here's the advertisement data. Again, nothing's really changed there. We see our service, and now look below the service. We see this new thing, this big long number here. Well, guess what? That matches up with our characteristic UUID, that 596 yada yada yada. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that. And now look at this. I've got this ability. I can write a value, but I can also read a value. All right. Well, this is cool. Let's go ahead and try reading a value. I'm going to click read. Now, you see this weird number? This is hexadecimal. Well, I don't know what it is with Bluetooth people. They freaking love hex numbers. Anyway, okay, so let me show you what I'm doing here. So in the top right, there's a little button that says hex. I'm just going to click on that. And now what I can do is I can select my format for the thing. So I'm going to say byte limit. I'm going to set it to 4. Okay. And then I'm going to select 4-byte unsigned integer, because that's what we're passing, right? So I'm selecting that. Now notice that the read value shows up as 146. Let me read again. Okay. See 185. So now let's count. So let's, okay. 1001, 1002, 1003. All right. Can you see that this is the number of seconds that my device has been running? Like, hey, that's how we're able to read information from our server, right? So our phone's acting as the client. This phone app is acting as the client, and we're reading from the server. And the server is also called a peripheral. Okay, great. Now notice that down in the descriptors, it says no data. And I'll tell you what's a little kind of funky, right? When we look at this, I see CIA monitoring device. I like that. But this whole big number here above this, properties read write, that's not very descriptive. I wish there was some descriptor we could add to it to make it more readable. So why don't we do that? Let's jump into our code. And what we're going to do is add a descriptor to our characteristic. And again, a descriptor is like metadata for your characteristic. Like, is it in Fahrenheit? Is it in seconds? All that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll talk about it. All right, so here I am in the code, and I'm going to go ahead and add a descriptor for our characteristic. So what did I do in the code? Well, the first thing I did is I added another include, and I included this BLE 2901. Now, the reason I had to add this is for our descriptor. And if 2901 means nothing to you, well, it will mean nothing to you now, but not in the future. All right. So there are these predefined BLE descriptors, and there's this whole list of them. And they're like 2901, 2902, 2903, think of some reference manual, highly technical, that's got ye long list of numbers. and some description about them. Well, that's what these descriptors are like. All right, so there is a descriptor called the name descriptor. I don't even know if that's the correct terminology for it. Anyway, it's called a 2901. It's a really common descriptor, and it's kind of been modeled in this BLE 2901 class right here. So if we just go into this, you can kind of get an idea. All right, so again, it's saying, hey, this is the GAT descriptor. So you remember what GAT was? Remember, you try to remember what it was and you feel like you're getting shot by a Gatling gun. Anyway, so this is descriptor 2901. It's called the characteristic user description. All right, and this is just a common descriptor that we can use to add. And basically what it does is it allows you to add user readable string describing the characteristic. Okay, so that's kind of what this does. And then all this in here basically just supports that. Okay, all right, so here we are back in the code. I added this, and in order to add that 2901 descriptor, we need to include this library. So I went ahead and did that. Then down here, going past our callbacks, here's setup. We're down into the setup. Here's our server, our services, our characteristics. Now here's our descriptor. So what I do is I create a pointer and I just name it descriptor 2901. Again, you could name that whatever you wanted. Oh man, I didn't name it P though. I should have named it P. I'm going to change that right now just so that we're being consistent here. Do you want to supercharge what you know about Arduino? Start writing your own code instead of just cutting and pasting? Definitely check out programmingelectronics.com. We have a training program that's been designed to get you up to speed fast, writing your own code and building your own projects with Arduino. Check it out in the link below. That's programmingelectronics.com, and check out our training program there. All right, so we've got this pointer. We're setting it equal to the return from this BLE 2901, right? So this pointer right here is pointing to our descriptor. And then what we do is we say, all right, here's our descriptor pointer right here. We're going to call the set description function. And this is like the meat and potato of what this descriptor is. It's just a string that tells us, it adds some metadata to our characteristic. So I'm just saying, hey, time. So basically the value that you see, it's going to be called the time. And then the next step we need to do is we need to say, hey, peak characteristic, the one that we made up here, we're going to go ahead and add the descriptor. What descriptor are we going to add? Oh, hey, we'll add this P descriptor 2901 that we just, defined, all that kind of stuff right here. So hopefully that makes a little sense. All right, so what we did here is we created the descriptor, check, and then we added the descriptor. Okay, well, now let's go ahead, run to the phone app and see what that did. All right, so here I am in the light blue app. Here's our CIA monitoring device. I'm going to go ahead and click connect. All right, so now we're connected. And notice when we look at this, we see that instead of that big long characteristic UUID, we actually see the word time. So, hey, that's pretty cool. Now it's a little more descriptive. We can click in there. Again, it's just like before. We can read values. I'm just going to go ahead. You got to set that every time. I wish there was a default where I could set it like that, but you can't. Anyway, so here I'm going to read the value. Okay, 94 seconds, 96, 97. All right, pretty cool. And here's the descriptor. What's it called? It's called time. Awesome. Well, this is great. So we've done a ton. Let's go ahead and jump back to the code and see what more we need to do to kind of wrap up this server example. All right, so we've been pretty busy. We created our device, we created the server, created our server callbacks, created a service, added that service to the server, created a characteristic, added that characteristic to the service, created some characteristic callbacks, or I guess just one callback, added that to our characteristic, then we added a descriptor to our characteristic, and now all we've got left is some advertising. And let me tell you, advertising, there's a lot to it. Check out the description for hardware and training we recommend you use for this ESP32 BLE library. Now, if you want to watch the next video in the series, check out this video right here. Or if you want to see the full Monty, all of these BLE videos stitched together into one mega one, you can check it out right here. Either here or here. Either here or here.